So welcome everybody. It is January 16th. It's Friday, and we're excited because in a few weeks from now, less than 2 weeks from now, we are going to be in Tampa. Right? That's the date, right? I have the date right. The date of the conference, actually, it's um, the main conference is the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 29th, 30, 31, and then there's some pre-conference days. I would say about 1,500 physicians and paramedics. 30% of the organization is now professional, meaning they're non-physicians, which I love to see that. It's going to be a great big research conference, and I know that all the players are going to be there. Just as a reminder, there is a Florida chapter dinner, which is going to be held on Friday night. Currently, we are oversold, let's put it that way. And so if you're not on the list now, and you want to try to come, let me know. I'll see if we can squeeze additional people, but for now, it's looking pretty sold out. Our main speaker that night will be one and only Tanner Smita, who's here today, my co-host. And so we're excited about that. And we're going to have several sponsors, Bill Intersurgical and Trauma Gel. Every week on this webinar, we try to bring you some really great presenters, folks who are doing things in EMS that we think you should be aware of. We have no conflicts with any of these folks. We wish we did, but we just try to, Tanner and I curate what's out there. We search the Twitter sphere, if you will, and we find great people. And I've actually met Ross and Will several times in the past. Most recently in Canada, when we were at the Fast Can conference run by the great Eric Bauer. And first, I would love for them to tell their story. Ross being a dual boarded physician, he's an EMS physician, he's an emergency medicine physician. But the great part is that he started as a paramedic. I think that the best medical directors are paramedics, and I wish I would have taken that path, but I didn't. He's currently working in Southwest Colorado. Will is also initially from Denver Health. He was there for over a decade, and now he found his way back as a critical care paramedic in North Carolina. They have a podcast called Loud and Clear. If you follow them on LinkedIn, I love Ross's writings on LinkedIn. He's a great writer too. So definitely follow along. So without any further ado, Ross and Will, if you want to make any further intros, and take it away, my friends.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Antevi. We are excited about this. Yeah, when you first told us about it in Calgary, it's kind of a no-brainer. I'm gonna work on sharing my screen here really quick. Um,
Yeah, well, Will's doing that. Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Like you said, I kind of stumbled to EMS on my way to medical school, but fell in love with EMS so much that I put off going to medical school for 4 years and became a paramedic. And I still miss the job today. I'm very happy where I am and all the things that I've accomplished, but it's a really great job, and I'm super passionate about it.
awesome. Well, hopefully you guys can see my screen. I should say the EMS gap.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you guys first two stories, and these stories are both important. They're different, but they highlight, we think, a similar issue that we're going to unpack, and then we'll talk about maybe what Ross and I are hoping to do about this. So the first story is my story, and I was working as a paramedic in Denver, Colorado. There's a very large homeless population there. And the image you're seeing is of a free clinic. So there's several free clinics in the city. The line forms early in the morning, and there's people all down the block trying to get care. So I was called there for non-emergent, no lights, no sirens, for a headache and high blood pressure. So kind of like an immediate eye roll, if I'm honest. And my partner and I, we walk into the lobby. There's a woman sitting there. She hasn't been seen yet. Again, line down the block. She went on to explain she's supposed to take her prescription hypertension medicine and she can't because she's out of refills. Now her blood pressure's high and she has a headache. So, to be really honest, again, even harder eye roll from me. And she wants to go to the emergency department. Now, no tricks, no strings attached. She has no neurological deficits. She's not having a big stroke. She's walking, she's talking. That's her complaint. And so we loaded into the ambulance and I tried to get a little more of the story. So she's obviously homeless. She has 3 kids. She was from Houston, Texas. Her home there burned down, and her only family that she had was in Colorado. So she packed up everything. She moved to Denver. When she got here, her family refused to take her in, saying they didn't have enough space. It was too many mouths to feed. So she ended up homeless, living in a shelter that catered mainly to families. She couldn't establish her primary care there. And so her only option to refill her hypertension medicine was to stand in these long lines at these clinics that formed early in the morning. Well, she couldn't do that. She got her kids enrolled in school like a good mother would, and the bus stop around the shelter was sketchy. So she would stand at the bus stop with her kids, get them on the bus to school, and then try to go get in line for her medicine, and she couldn't. Now she's out of it. She's symptomatic and she's having a headache. So once I heard this story, I mean, it was gut-wrenching to hear. And I noticed a few things in me. First, I was ashamed of my initial bias, like, eye roll, this isn't an emergency. And then honestly, second, I had some fear. Like, I don't know anything about prescription regimens for primary hypertension. I had no training in that. And lastly, where should I even take her? My only option is an emergency department, but like, is one better than another? I don't know. I mean, what resources are available in the city? And all of a sudden, I need to know the pathways to help these underserved folks. So hold that. Story number 2. This is of a crew. So 2 paramedics, two dual paramedic ambulance, responded with a BLS fire crew to the scene of a cardiac arrest. So they've been doing appropriate ACLS. They very briefly achieve ROSC and they initiate transport, but then they quickly lose pulses again during transport. And they're reaching a point in the resuscitation where it kind of starts to feel futile, but they're already taking the patient to the hospital. No strings attached again. Both of these are competent paramedics. They've provided great standard of care, and they called the emergency department to notify them of their impending arrival. So in this particular system, when you called the emergency department, you got a base physician. So one of the attendings would answer the phone and you would give your report to them. And it was a conversation, really kind of like part notification, part online medical control. And so their call went like this.
There's suspension.
Hey, that's Paramedic Nelson, Denver Health 41. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
All right. I'm calling a 10 setup to you guys. We have a 21-year-old female cardiac arrest.
Okay.
Friends on scene said last seen normal was anywhere between 30 minutes and 3 hours ago.
Okay.
Known alcohol as well as cocaine use. For us, she has been, initially she was asystole on the monitor. After 3 rounds of Epi and 2 milligrams of Narcan, we got pulses back briefly.
Okay. What did it look like on the monitor when you got pulses back?
It was a wide PEA, or just like a wide complex.
Okay. And was it
Probably
slow or
right
fast?
like sweaty. It was slow.
It was slow PEA. Have you guys given bicarb?
We have not.
Okay. With the wide, complex, slow PEA and the cocaine, I would definitely administer bicarb. And how far away are you guys?
We're about 4 to 5 minutes out.
4 to 5 minutes, and CPR is actively in progress right now?
Correct.
Okay. We will have a room for your arrival. We'll see you in 4 to 5. Thank you.
So in this call, the physician astutely recognized that this is possibly sodium channel blockade from a very rare complication of a cocaine overdose. As the story goes, the crew then achieved ROSC. They transported the patient to the emergency department where they handed off directly to the physician they had just spoken to on the phone. The patient then required multiple sodium bicarb boluses in the ED and then ended up with sustained ROSC and was later discharged neurologically intact.
Yeah, for me, this case really highlights so many moments when I was a paramedic in my career. I finished paramedic school and was like, why wasn't I ever taught that? Like, cocaine overdose leading to a sodium channel blockade that is treated with a medication that I have on my ambulance. Like, these are things that I just felt like were missing in my education. But the truth of the matter is that emergency medicine is just so broad that you can't learn it all. You can't teach it all, especially in a year of paramedic school. I mean, I, as an emergency physician with a decade of training, still can't know it all or have been taught it all, and I will have never seen everything. But that was initially why we started this podcast, was in an attempt to fill those gaps, to teach one step past what we learned in paramedic school, things that I wished I knew. Because at the time when we started this 5-6 years ago, there wasn't a ton of continuing education geared specifically towards paramedics. It was a lot of either you had your paramedic textbook, which is the same basic information that you already learned, or it was emergency medicine physician resources or ICU resources, which were fascinating, but like 70% over your head or not applicable to what you do in the streets.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, to Ross's point, are these stories of bad paramedics? Well, one, I'm biased, one of them because it was me, but I don't think so. These are stories of people wading into complex problems with topics that they haven't really been trained on. And the first one specifically is just a really complicated social situation that requires critical thinking, leadership ability, curiosity, humility. And then the second one, as Ross pointed out, are these medical topics that go one step beyond what you learn in paramedic school. So paramedics, we stand in a rare place in the landscape of modern healthcare. We're called upon by anyone, anytime, for any reason. We see undifferentiated patients, which not a lot of people in medicine do, and we get called for emergencies, life-threatening things, time-critical things, but we also get called as just the entry point into the healthcare system. So we have to be nimble, adaptable, and committed to lifelong learning. So, like Ross said, this is what birthed our podcast, originally called EMS Cast, but now called Loud and Clear. Kudos to Ross. He started the podcast in 2020 with a colleague. Ross and I, a little history. We worked as paramedics together over a decade ago in Denver. I then went on to still work there, paramedic field trainer, and then supervisor there. And Ross went on to medical school, returned to Denver Health as an emergency medicine resident, and then an EMS fellow there. So we worked as paramedics on the street in the ambulance. And then by the time Ross was doing his EMS fellowship, I was in like a leadership capacity, and we got to interact in that way too. So the mission has always been to provide clear, actionable, life-saving information to EMS professionals and to go one step beyond what you learned in paramedic school. And as Dr. Antevi pointed out, currently, neither one of us live in Denver. Ross is a medical director and EMS physician in Southwest Colorado, and I work as a flight paramedic for an academic center in North Carolina. But one little thing about our name, where did that come from? You may have noticed in the biophone call, it was routine practice for the physician on the other end, once the connection was established, to say loud and clear, go ahead. And so that for us has some nostalgia to that base physician creating that connection with the paramedic in the field, and the two being able to interplay off one another, rely on one another, and share information back and forth as professionals. And so that's what we want to bring to our podcast. Is I have the current field experience. Ross has the current emergency medicine and medical direction experience. And what we typically do is talk to experts about these different topics in emergency medicine. Podcast has about 150 downloads a day. We're really proud of that, and it's been going for a while. But we kind of felt in the last year like we want to do more to help step into this gap. And so in order to understand the gap even further, and the knowledge gap, we did a research project. So we interviewed over 50 paramedics. We asked them questions about the challenges they face and the things they feel when they're out on the street. And some trends and themes emerged. A lot of lack of confidence was huge, imposter syndrome, and how to get the mental horsepower that they gain, all of this knowledge, to practical application on the street. We're in an interesting time right now where there's more free online medical education available than there ever has been. I mean, you can go on YouTube and key up a phenomenal lecture from some highly specialized physician and learn to a great depth about any complex topic in medicine. That's good. We're not saying that that's bad. But what happens is you still end up with, well, how do I make it matter? And that's what we want to do. And I think our research emerged something, a deeper theme and kind of cultural theme within EMS emerged, which is people don't necessarily feel confident in what they're doing. A lot of times they feel like they can't speak up about it. And they kind of get to this point in their career where they feel like everyone around them would say, like, you don't know that, like you should know better. How do you do your job and you struggle with that or not know that? And so there's a lot of like suffering in silence that happens. People are afraid they're going to be labeled as weak or incompetent or kind of like ridiculed out of their job. So what are we doing about it? Well, we still have our podcast. It's available on all like Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We have an email newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website, emspodcast.com. But the thing that we're really proud of is we've launched a course in a community called the Paramedic Confidence Builder. So we're trying to step into this gap. We find the overwhelming majority of paramedics we talk to are really smart. They have tons of knowledge. They want to improve. And they want to do that in the setting of a community where that's built on curiosity, humility, and rooted in a lot of the softer skills. This isn't like I need to just go super deep on a specific pathology. This is like I need tips and tricks on leading my peers. I need practical applications for how to communicate effectively on a scene. I need to learn how to better mentally rehearse that crike because when the time comes to do it, it's now or never. So we touch on a lot of human performance topics, a lot of leadership topics, and then that's what a lot of we have over 20 weeks of lecture content that people get to view. But then we also have a community with an online forum where people can post cases or challenges they're facing and get Ross and I's perspective as well as their peers all over North America, including Canada.
And this is a really important piece to understand too, as like EMS educators and EMS leaders, is that learning is a social act. You can only get so far learning something on your own, but to truly understand it, to truly master it, you really need to wrestle it and you really need to bounce those ideas off of somebody else and see if they land or see if they disagree and struggle with it a little bit and then hear outside perspectives, hear what other people are learning, teach it to other people. You need to act on it and take it one step further than just thinking about it in your own mind. And so learning really should be social. And so that's a big part of this as well.
Yeah, totally. We talk about it a little bit like what we want it to feel like is this supercharged version of working a shift with the like really well-respected senior medic at your agency where like everything they do, you're like, oh man, I want to emulate that. I want to copy that, or oh, I need to do things that way. So along with the lectures, the online community, we also have a coaching call weekly where people can gather similar to what we're doing right now, share lessons learned, cases, or any challenges they're facing. So far, our results, we've been really encouraged. I would say the community is really self-supportive and doing really well. We're enrolling more people. These are some quotes from people that are our students. The first one, this course helped me sharpen my decision-making and pattern recognition while gaining real confidence on scene. The second one, I've started to find my voice and delegate better. Honestly, I'm less scared when I step out of the ambulance now. So like Ross said, one of our goals is, this is a broader challenge, I think, to EMS education and leadership everywhere. Our goal in presenting isn't to just sell you on what we're doing in our course. But our sell is actually, I think, to you guys as paramedics and leaders, that there is this potential like cultural thing happening in EMS that can undermine our industry. And so if you're a leader in this industry, we implore you to learn from what we're seeing and develop more support for your paramedics, because there's trickle down effect. I mean, employee satisfaction, retention, your clinical quality, your paramedics, a lot of the people that we interact with, they are through school, they're through their field training, and they're at that point now where there's kind of like no parachute. And so that's when a lot of this really sets in for them. And they're hungry for the practical applications of, again, the things like leadership under stress, learning and self-study, human performance under stress, brain function while you're under time pressure. People are hungry for this, and we would, implore you to learn from what we're doing and develop support structures for your people. What do you think, Ross? Anything? What
Yeah,
else would you say?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just so when I started this podcast, the gap I was trying to fill was that lack of like one step past what I learned in paramedic school, the knowledge gap. But just as Will mentioned, knowledge is like ever increasingly easy at our fingertips, even with AI. As you can just get whatever information you want immediately. And there's a Duluth of great EMS educational, like continuing education now, like this conference. And so the gap now, as we see it after talking to over 50 paramedics, almost 60 paramedics now, is the operational gap. That when they were in paramedic school, like things felt more certain. Like when you're given a scenario in paramedic school, it's designed to get you to a certain diagnosis. Because once you know the diagnosis, usually the treatment pathway is clear. But unfortunately, when you go out into the real world, the patient didn't read the textbook. The diagnosis is rarely ever clear. And oftentimes there's overlapping things going on at once. And you suddenly need to learn how to navigate this uncertainty. And all the while, you're no longer surrounded by your peers in paramedic school. And so you kind of feel like you're on an island and alone, and you lack mentorship, you lack coaching. And we heard this again and again from the people we talk to. And it's funny, it doesn't matter if you're a big agency or a little agency, you have the same problem just for different reasons. When you're a big agency, you have a ton of resources and a ton of manpower, but you're running so many calls that you're just trying to keep up. So you can't pull those resources from the streets to do some coaching, to do some mentorship, to do some structured education. Whereas in a rural department, you have a lot of time to do those things, but you don't have the manpower, you don't have the resources to provide those things. So everybody has the same problem for different reasons, but it is a problem. And I think this is what our new paramedic providers are missing, is that mentorship and that coaching and the peer learning and the peer support. And so we think this is the gap, and this is our mission. And we want to get this mission out to everybody so everybody can start working on this and addressing this for our paramedics to help the field get better as a whole.
So, Ross and Will, first of all, my brain is going in so many directions right now because as a medical director, and I think many of us on this call can really tap into what you guys are talking about. There's a lot of areas I want to move into, but first I want to go into the fact that education, the way it's being delivered today, is massively changed, and I can tell you that because recently the American Heart Association put out a AHA for EMS webinar. Like here are the guidelines that we put out for EMS. There were three people, they're good people. They were talking. They filled up the entire time just talking to the people. Everybody was on mute. And then one of the people said, we kind of get the feeling here that most people are getting their education from podcasters. Quote, that's what they said, almost in a bad way. Okay. Huh. So first, I would like for you to respond to, or just speak to the fact that as leaders of departments, we need to recognize how our personnel, our members, are actually getting their education, where they're getting it from, and the quality of that education. That's number one. That's the first question. The second thing I would like to ask for you is, there are agencies that have the resources to have officer development classes. And, mine do, but they're not that frequent, right? In the business world, and so I have two brothers who owned a big company, and they were part of a group they called Vistage, Vistage. And what is Vistage? It's exactly what you guys are developing. It's a group of about 10 to 15 other CEOs of companies of similar size, and they meet regularly. Why? To discuss their issues, and in this case, to discuss cases, to discuss mentorship, problems, issues, leadership, tactical, strategic, all that. And so the rest of the world is doing this, but EMS doesn't. And once you get hired as a paramedic, you end up, like you said, you're just falling without a parachute. And then you go look for a podcast here, a podcast there. Let me go to a conference here. It's kind of scattered, right? So if you guys wouldn't mind addressing those issues of, podcasting in general, and then does EMS need to do a better job of, like, so for example, I think what you're doing should be under the umbrella of the NEMSP. The organization should be doing this. You guys are carving out that little space, but I think this would be great for the country to have access to in smaller groups. So it's a lot in there, but if you want to address that.
Yeah, Ross, you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with podcasts, there's both good and bad, right? Is in that it's readily accessible. It's easy to listen to familiarize yourself, to get access to. The bad is, like, oftentimes it's not peer reviewed. And so you have to really trust the information that the person is giving you, or go verify it for yourself, trust but verify. And so I think we could do more and do better. And Will and I have talked about this and thought about this, and we've actually would love to do this, is have more peer review of our content. So we create something before we put it out there. We actually have multiple people listen to it, make sure that things we said are accurate and they agree. And if there's any corrections, we can add those in before we release it. And we would love to get to that point. And I think it would be great if we had more of that peer review of some of this continuing education content. But one of the things that I like to say is, knowledge is not power. Knowledge plus action is power. And I think that is also another thing that we miss when we're just learning things through podcasts, or just listening to things, or watching a video, is yes, we're gaining that knowledge, but until we take that knowledge and put action to it and practice it, or mentally simulate it, or talk about it with somebody else, we don't really fully gain access to that power. There's Scott Weingart said on our episode with him, amateurs talk plans, but experts talk logistics. And, like, it's one thing to know the right answer. It's another thing to know how to do the right answer. When are you going to pull the trigger? How are you going to physically make that happen? And so that's another piece of it as well.
Yeah, I don't have the answer for this, but I would also add in, I think there in the landscape, there's room for all of it, right? Because, I think most recently I worked for a semi-rural agency part-time on the ground when I first moved here to North Carolina, and we had monthly training, but their training it's hard. They have certain protocol items or equipment that they just have to train us on, right? We got a new whatever, we got to have an in-service on it. And so there are those constraints. Like we only get everybody together for so many hours once a month, and we just have to do our required stuff. And so, I think avenues for good podcasting and other things, it's a great adjunct, because inevitably too, as a paramedic, you need all that stuff that your agency's providing, but it's also, I just had this really challenging patient 2 shifts ago, and the ED doc said, this is what's going on. I want to learn more about that. And so people are going to self-study no matter what.
Yeah, no, I agree that there's a lot of, listen, even if I look at my wife, who's non-medical, she follows a lot of medical people, right? And so there are a lot of people who are following a lot of people. And the question is the content something that as an agency, you can say, we believe in this content, or are the medics just out for themselves on their own learning, whether it's related to the protocol or not? So given that baseline, I'm going to go to a current paramedic who's also in medical school, so following the Ross Orpet pathway. He's also getting his PhD. He's
Nice.
also written about 8,000 papers. My co-host, Tanner Smeda. So Tanner, you're hearing this. Love to get your feedback on what Ross and Will presented today.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. You've certainly earned a listener. I'll be tuning in to your podcast in the
Thank
future,
you.
certainly. So one thing, there's plenty of companies out there that offer, some refreshers or content reviewing core EMS content, right? Reviews on trauma, some specialized topics, OB, pediatrics, etc. But I think where you really stand out is, and I think we all know this to be true, is that what really makes a great paramedic is not necessarily, right, adherence to protocols or knowledge. It's the ability to communicate. It's the ability to have confidence in decision making. It's all of these kind of things that are kind of ethereal and can't be measured. And really, at least in my experience, aren't really talked about as things that are coachable or learnable or are addressed in continuing education, right? There's sort of things like that guy or that woman, they have it or they don't, or it's a function of experience, right? And it's not treated as something that you can focus on and address with education and coaching. So the question I have for you about that is, the resources that you have available. I believe you have one-to-one coaching available, and then you also have some resources to kind of address maybe self-perceived weaknesses in communication or some other topics. How do you come up with that content? Is it based on your personal experience? Is there like grounded educational theory that you use to underpin the material, the coaching material that you provide? Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basis of it came from our research where we talked to over 50 paramedics about what they were currently struggling with. And it was all those things that you mentioned that we've historically said, well, with time, you'll figure it out. Whatever it is, and how much time and how much struggle and pain and hurt is that going to occur over that time. And so we created the course to address those needs that we were hearing. And then the content itself came through the literature that Will and I read. In fact, a lot of the lectures are tied to specific texts or books or research that we reference as we're teaching those concepts. And a lot of it is, again, you need to go do something, right? So with each of the lectures, there's an exercise. So each lecture is meant to do like one a week, because afterwards there's an exercise. Take this concept to your next shift and do these things, practice this thing. So that, because, mastery is a journey, right? It's not a destination. It's something that you have to continue to walk. And in order to get there, you can't focus on the outcome. This is what I want. You need to focus on the process. This is what I do to get it that makes it inevitable.
Great. And it's great to hear that you're doing it in that manner. We have a lot of educators on this call that I would love to hear from. Lou Steinberg, Joseph Zalkin. I see someone by the name of Toshi is commenting. Please unmute your microphone. Let's start with you, Joseph. You've been around the block a long time. You're seeing the transition from, coming to headquarters, and we'll talk to you with some PowerPoints, to now everyone would rather get on TikTok or YouTube or sign up for a much better Con Ed course than what's existing today, especially if it's if the data is not up to date.
So a couple things. Yes, I'm old.
I didn't say that. I did not say
no,
that.
but we didn't have PowerPoint when I started out. It was overhead projectors and 35 millimeter slides. But notwithstanding, I'm an observer at this point, but I'm passionate about competent care. And I think some of the key points to that, and your speakers have said it, that you need the expert that's 35 miles away from your flagpole in order for people to listen and take in what your information is. Our current education program is teach to the test. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Having evolved over the last 50 years with programming, trying to expand knowledge, trying to correct errors that were part of that initial knowledge, things that do not pan out to work for patients, requires an understanding of research, what research is, good, bad, otherwise, what the trends in the industry are currently. I mean, think just in the last decade, how many practices have changed based on additional knowledge? And I think the other key point that I mentioned in my comment was we have to prep people for change. Because it is today doesn't mean it will be tomorrow. And that constantly looking back and verifying what we think is dogma may not be. So my 2 cents are there's a plethora of options for people today. Your initial education may be face to face, it may be virtual. I agree with you. Come join NAMSP, probably one of the best education programs out there, blended with all levels of professionals, physicians, medics, nurses, PAs, etc. And also support your local state efforts to expand knowledge through your local programming.
Excellent. Well, so Joseph, I'm going to throw you just a simple topic then. I'm going to make you the director of an organization, and your protocols do not allow for DSED. Let's just say, let's give that example. But then your medics are out there listening to all this great content. They hear Chesky's out there. They read the New England Journal paper from November 2022. Do you think that the content out there today, because it's so easily available, coming from great folks that have the evidence base behind them, do you think that the way that education is being rolled out today, that it's making the agency better? And how do you think that the leaders need to adapt? Because there are a lot of folks on this call and in EMS in general who know nothing about podcasts for their agency. They're not on LinkedIn, where all of their folks are. Is there a disconnect there? And do you think that those folks who are running the departments need to kind of bridge the gap there for EMS?
Yes, you would use double sequence, something that we started back in 2009
Yes.
as your item for me to defend.
Yes,
but that's a good concept. And with that, it was enlightening when we started talking about changing our practice, especially involving both the physical issue of having another defibrillator present, as well as the timing of moving to this new procedure, akin to the use of bicarb in the cocaine overdose. How do you cue people in? Yes, there's a disconnect. I think, especially I look at our NMSP chapters, this is an opportunity to reach out to small rural communities who may not know of the resources that are out there. And with that, it was enlightening. I'm echoing.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
So I think there's opportunities for that. I also think all politics is local. And if you want to change local programming, you have to climb that mountain. It's got to be a partnership both with the education programming folks in the department and the medical director and the director if it's coming down to a change of fiscal use of dollars to acquire a widget, that you need a pathway for it. People are going to learn new things, and it may make the stickiness issue of sticking with an agency that's starting down the path of innovation versus an agency that's stuck with, we've always done it this way.
All right, so let me ask Ross and Will then. You have agencies out there, MCHD. There are folks out there who have gone the extra step of creating their own podcast. They have a room, they have a microphone, they're putting out content. What is your take on an agency listening today? Should they go tell their FTOs, okay, I want you to start a podcast, or should they just say, hey, let's just sign up with Loud and Clear? What's your take on that? Because that's what's, that's happening, whether we like it or not, especially with the advent of AI. What are your thoughts on that for the agency that's rural, urban, or suburban?
First off, I guess I'm going to answer your question maybe in a roundabout way, but underpinning what you brought up, Dr. Antevi, I think is really at its core a leadership issue for everybody to consider, which is the dynamic you described was, let's say you're a medical director, a chief, or whomever in an agency, and you have your frontline personnel bringing something to you saying, "Hey, I heard about this. Can we do this?" Well, that's difficult. That can be a difficult challenge. We need to verify everything. We need to research it on our own. But also, that's a dynamic didn't fully exist before, YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, all these things that we're doing now. Some people would say that's a bad landscape. I would just argue it's changing, evolving, new, different, and with more information becomes more challenges for people to make themselves better, like leaders listening to their frontline folks bringing forth good information, not wasting someone's time. So yeah, I mean, like within that is it's incumbent upon people in leadership roles to evolve too. This isn't just about paramedics trying to be better. This is about agencies trying to provide better care as a whole. And so I think maybe to answer your question, I mean, to be really honest, I don't know anything about the agency specific podcast at the agency level. I think if it's, you know, could it be a sales tactic to get them to recruit people? Maybe, but if it highlights great care that they're doing, then is that so bad? If it's, hey, we're doing these things and it's impacting patients and other places can learn about it too, that's great. It kind of democratizes the sharing of this information that ultimately should be geared at benefiting patients.
Yeah, and I think it's both of those things. It's that they recognize that their paramedics are not looking at PowerPoints. I was at my agency yesterday, and basically, you go in there and on the computer you hear a PowerPoint running, right? Because that they're told to go on to whatever. I'm not even going to mention the name of the other thing that we use. They press play. They all have the answers. It's A, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And then the click, 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 click. And now it's been documented that they did it. Whereas you have the other folks who are not doing that. They're actually saying, "Oh, my medical director has a podcast." Many of us, for example, in Palm Beach County, we have a studio where we go in, and every time we release a protocol, we go into the studio and we create like a 2, 3 minute, 4 minute video on it. And I guess that's also what I find fascinating about what you're doing is that you're plugged into the future of how this information is getting pushed out. And I would love to see it expand while at the same time not be that I'm in a Slack group with 1,000 other paramedics, and then all of a sudden you lose that ability to say, "Hey, I'm going to be on the call with Ross and Will this week, and I'm going to tell them about a really shitty case that I had where I thought I effed it up, and I want to hear what they say, and I want to hear what Tanner has to say because Tanner's in the group." You see what I'm saying? Like, how do we take this internet and still create the ability for paramedics to feel like they're in a safe place? And again, you're only two people. If all of a sudden, if 3,000 people called you tomorrow, you'd be screwed, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so how do you scale what you're doing is really my bigger question over time.
No, it's a great question. We've talked about it too, because it is hard to scale, right? Like if Ross and I are the key, then there's only so much of me and Ross to go around. But that's why I think we feel we're not the key. The key is that people are hungry for interpersonal human connection with other people struggling with the same stuff. And that held in tension with the fact that it's augmented by this huge landscape of all this amazing education that you can get. And so that I believe it is possible to scale that human connection piece in a very thoughtful way that involves mentorship, humility, curiosity, and leadership. I don't know what you would say, Ross.
Well, and one of the keys is developing that psychological safety within your company, right? The advantage to our program is that you're talking to people who like aren't working next to you. So you don't have to be as afraid of saying like I F this up, because you're not going to like then turn around and feel like they're going to judge you for the rest of your career. And so having that disconnect allows a little more psychological safety if I can speak more openly and not have to worry about my reputation taking a hit where I work. But you can create that in your own company, and the ideal situation would be that you had that in your own company. But it's a really hard thing to create and have that culture, but it's something we should absolutely all strive for.
Agreed. Let me bring in a good friend and someone I saw in person the other day, Lou Steinberg. So Lou, you've been an educator for a long time, and you are someone who is on every podcast, you're on every webinar. Like if there's a webinar, like you ought to have Lou in your on your speed dial, because Lou will always say, "Hey Pete, webinar starting in 5 minutes. You got to be on this one." So Lou, you've been there, you've seen it all, you've done it all. What are your thoughts to what Ross and Will have to say today?
A lot. So first, what you said, I'll probably do 20 hours worth of webinars and stuff to get a half hour worth of material. It's important for me to dilute to what they really need and make sure I know what I'm talking about. Right now, there's way too much paramedic education. That'll sound bizarre, but there's too much for a new person to grasp everything. And a lot of the instructors really don't know it well enough to teach it and connect. Part of being an instructor is you have to know your stuff really well, and you have to be able to connect to your audience. Day one at paramedic school, I would tell the students, your job is to read the book. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not going to read these PowerPoint slides. My job is to make it make sense. We need to take the classroom to the streets so that people understand what the hell they're doing with it, not so much the theory behind it. They'll learn eventually clinical judgment, but if they don't have critical thinking, they're never going to do well. Excuse me. The other problem we have now is everyone new grew up with cell phones. They want the answer from the electronic toys. They don't know how to do basic assessments. And if you don't look at your patient and do basic assessments, everything else goes to garbage. So I even look back every 5 years. I wonder, how was I teaching 5 years ago with the stuff I know now that I didn't know then? So it's constantly evolving. And if you don't do that, like you said, with all the webinars and stuff, I can sit here in my room and go across the country and see everything. But most people, it's a job. We do it. So when I go teach it, I make sure I know it well enough so I can bring it down to a level they'll understand and be able to grasp the concepts and take it to the streets.
Okay, so Lou, okay, so you guys are right now on different ends of the spectrum. Ross and Will are remoting into people's brains, right? And they're connecting, in North Carolina, Denver, it could be in Idaho. You are driving in your car and you're going to an agency that that would love to have your services, and now you're in front of people trying to make that impact. These are two different ways of doing things. How would you say, now knowing what you know and where you've been, where are we going to end up in 5 years from now? Are there still going to be the Lou Steinbergs of the world doing this, or is it all going to be Ross and Will? Is the agency going to say, you're going to sign up for their stuff and their group, and then we'll see you back on the streets?
I hope there'll be a hybrid of both, because I think we need both. You can learn a lot sitting at home from all these podcasts, certainly get a lot more opinions, but I like being in the classroom. I've gotten to know one agency has 300 people. They know me pretty well by now. They're comfortable with asking stuff. I put my famous quote in before, if you didn't see it. It's always better to feel stupid for asking a question than for your patient to feel dead because you didn't. So people are always afraid to, like, I should know this, I'm afraid to. Once they get comfortable with you, they'll ask that question. Okay, or they'll grab you afterwards, even if they don't want to ask in front of everyone. They'll grab you on the side and say, hey, can you explain this better to me? When I taught capnography recently, I drilled down so much to get it so I knew it inside and out about metabolism, about everything. So now they can understand that from me. So I think it takes both to some extent, and not necessarily, part of the problem with the instructor is you have your buddy on B shift. He becomes the instructor because you need someone on that shift. Doesn't mean he's a good instructor. Might be a great paramedic, but if they're not able to understand it well enough, to explain it well enough, be able to connect to that person, you're not doing any good. You're just getting credit for something.
Agreed. Let me bring in Gordon Miller. So Gordon, you're in DeSoto Parish up in Louisiana. And you run a big agency that has a heck of a lot of complexity. T1 ventilator, you're doing it all, man. You're doing it way before all the rest of us. How do you navigate this complex web of educational resources that are being thrown at everybody all day long?
I think there are a lot of good, like as far as online resources, we have to have that now. Even I use that sometimes. There are a lot that are, I wouldn't say incorrect. They may not be the current practices or theories, or maybe something older, and there's relatively newer things out there right now in certain fields. I see that with the ventilators a lot. Um, there are a lot of people in our agency that may bring something to me and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I'll entertain it and say, "Hey, let me see what this is all about." And, I think that's a good thing to get us all talking, because what you may be doing over here, they're not doing over there, and that's how we all get together and say, "Oh, hey, that's a great idea." The cocaine thing, for instance, that's been our guidelines for the past 10 years or so. It all has its good sides and bad sides. Like Lou said, we have to have that in person in the back of a stressful situation. Iron sharpens iron. We have to see what that clinician is going to do during that, demonstration of, "Hey, I'm under stress right now. I had to perform on demand." It may all fall apart, and you figure out and look at, "Hey, we need to work on something else." In our agency, my kind of training officer, he will go over a lot of the didactic sets, like, "Hey, this is what's going on." He'll push out the new education. He may push out new guidelines, and I take them in the field. I get in the back of the medic unit with them, and I do the hands-on portion of that. And it works very well. I'll be the first to admit, if you listen to me lecture about something, most people, I lose them because I want to go so deep into it. That's a fault I have. And I recognize that, though. And I can talk about advanced level ventilator stuff or ultrasound or whatever it may be. It's easier for me to take somebody and say, "Hey, take my hand, feel my hand, see what I'm doing. Look at this patient, see the changes I'm making on this ventilator, see what their lungs are doing, see what the capnography is doing, see what the volumetrics doing, see what their blood pressure is doing." That's what I'm good at. And I think everybody needs to find their role where they fit in really well. They need to admit their faults. We don't need to have a bunch of people out there doing podcasts trying to become internet celebrities or something like that, if they're not good at that. We do have to, weed out those and say, "Hey, these people are solid about what they're doing. This person, maybe not so much," if that makes sense.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a different way then. You have, let's say, how many medics do you have? How many folks do you have at your place?
In between full-time and part-time, probably around 70 or 80, somewhere in that area.
Okay. So let's say all 80 right now are getting all their information from disparate sources, right? You have your protocol, but then one goes out and listens to this one, another one listens to this one. If someone came to you and said, "Okay, Gordon, we want you to pick a source out there that you trust that will allow your medics to get information from one place," is that a reality that the department starts to engage with folks who are doing that, or is it just basically your 70 folks are going to have a free for all of information, but their expectation is that your department that they know what to do when they walk into the doors of your department? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you balance that?
And that's something I don't think you'll ever be able to completely control that in here, because you have to have a great relationship with your people, because what you don't want is a bunch of talking in the background, right? So you're putting information out there that you're like, "Hey, here's the study data. This is solid." Somebody sees, some insane person talking about, "Hey, we're doing this now, and this is the way," and they're a good salesman, but there's no data, no evidence, anything like this. What you don't want is that person trying to kind of backdoor you and say, like, "Hey, look at this," and have everybody on that and trying to turn everybody against everybody. I think that's a risk always. And we have to kind of separate that, and we have to make it like everybody in agreement, say like, "Hey, this is the good solid pathway for what we're going to do." If we want to look at other things and newer things, like, "Hey, this is a new and upcoming thing, and this person's talking about this," obviously we can entertain talking about that. But I think there needs to be, as far as like your agency, there needs to be a solid source that is proven, that is evidence-based, that's just not some fluff out there somebody's putting out there.
Okay, I agree with that. I love that answer. Let me go back to Ross and Will, and we'll kind of uh,
Yeah.
go to this final thought, which is I'm going to make you, Ross, the next president of the NEMSP. Okay, boom. You're new the president. Where do you take the organization with respect to this deluge of information? Is it the organization itself, the national organization that could peer review, that could vet all the stuff you're doing, that could be a part of these groups around the country, small groups and so forth? Um, take your brain into the like the national organization, and perhaps tell us what you think should be done to bring the organization into the, let's call it, the digital social media world that we're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been obsessed with this idea with our new mission about how do I not just teach one thing, but how do I teach somebody to learn? How do I teach somebody to go out and absorb all of that education on their own in a responsible manner? And so I think this, like, we could never have like an either or. If you were to ever attempt to have we're only doing this virtual thing or we're only doing this in-person thing, you're going to lose a lot of benefits that both offer. Like, we can never lose the in-person trainings and mentorship and hands-on. And at the same time, we can't control all of the online education out there, nor do we want to, because we would lose a lot of innovation if we were to do that. So instead, we don't do enough teaching people how to responsibly learn, how to go out there and absorb the deluge of education and resources, and then be like, okay, what is true? To ask them themselves three questions, or I guess now it's five questions. We had the chief of education for Thompson Valley EMS here in Colorado came on and gave a lecture to our class on learning theories. And there's three questions that every learner should ask themselves. And then he added two questions that I had taught in our class. And the first question is, how will I use this? Like, how and in what way will I use this? The second question is, why must I use this? Why does this matter, this information that I just learned? And the third question is, when will I use this? So what specific triggers will cause me to use this information that I just learned? And then the two questions you add on to that is it true? Is this information true? Is there some way I can vet this? Is there some way I can verify this? Is it peer reviewed? Are there multiple resources? And is it helpful? Even though the information's true, but is it truly helpful to me in the field? And that is a lot of what when we rebranded to Loud and Clear, part of it was like, there's a lot of like high level education out there, but sometimes like, does it matter? Does it matter to the patient in front of me on the streets? And so at the end of every episode now, our tagline is EMS guiding principles. At the end of every episode, we connect it back to like, what are the guiding principles that actually matter to my patient in front of me so that I don't lose sight of the forest through the trees?
Love that. Love that. Will, what do you say? National thought process here on how do you take this and make it so that it is not just available for the 20 people, but if you're at the national level as a member of the NAMSP, saying, how do we take all the resources that are available, but actually make it so that it's impactful in the way that Ross just described, which is beautiful, impactful to the rural, the suburban, and the urban agency.
I don't know if I have a magic bullet for that, but the first thing that came to my mind was humility. So as a paramedic, you have to remain humble. You want to learn, you want to get better, and you want to do the right thing. As a leader or a medical director, you have to remain humble as well. Like, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers. Like, there are avenues of learning that I can go down to try to employ or equip my folks with the best possible tools, education, training. And then Ross and I, or anyone trying to do what we're doing, anyone in an educational role or trying to do something publicly, we have to remain humble as well. Ross and I don't have all the answers, and that's actually something that I love about, like, that's been an unspoken ethos in what we do all the time. It's always been about, hey, there's this thing that I was faced with on the street, and I wish I had known more about that. Who can we talk to that's an expert in that? And let's learn from them. And so I think this curiosity, learning, and ultimately humility is something that has to underpin like all of these big level steps that we're doing.
Agreed. And I'm going to bring in Tanner one more time. So Tanner, I know you focus on cardiac arrest research, but and maybe Ross and Will can let us know. I mean, I don't know of any research today looking at the value, if you can determine quantitatively what the value is of this new style of education. So Tanner, thoughts on what research needs to look like in this realm of education, social media, digital, podcasting, etc. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that it would certainly be it would be very challenging to compare like one educational modality to another in some sort of a randomized controlled trial. You could perhaps do something like compare different EMS agencies that subscribe to different providers of education, and then look at their compliance with NEMSQL measures, for instance, that education is specifically targeted to ensure compliance with, right? So, right, some of the big ones using waveform capnography to confirm all advanced airways, right? That's supposed to be a national standard. You could select whatever NEMSQL measures you wanted or whatever endpoints you wanted. Um, and I would love to see that sort of research done. I believe in the value of the kind of educational material and content that we've been discussing during this presentation. Um, but as you said, I focus primarily on interventions to improve survival from cardiac arrest, so it's outside my wheelhouse.
Okay, but okay, how about we start with something more basic and just basically a survey. So does anyone on this call, and I'll pitch it over to Ross and Will, what percentage of paramedics today are getting their education from PowerPoint in the at headquarters versus an alphabet course versus a podcast, social media that's outside of the realm of their agency? Does anyone know what the percentages are there?
I teach as an adjunct part-time at a local community college in the paramedic program. So my sample size is very small. My experience is very limited. I think it's all of it. People are getting information education from all of it. What I see in paramedic students that I interact with is they dive in and they're hungry. They're getting PowerPoint, they're getting hands-on, they're getting all the stuff, the traditional things you experience in paramedic school. And on their ride to school, they're queuing up a podcast, or they have a concept they learn in school and they want deeper knowledge. They go on YouTube. Like, I think it's all of it. And so I don't know
what percent though. So okay.
True,
so
true. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so
There,
Will or
there is
Ross,
some
if I
research.
okay, yeah, let me hear it.
Yeah,
What's the
so
data?
I don't know the exact numbers, but they've done a few studies mainly looking at, I'm familiar mostly with the emergency medicine, but mainly looking at emergency medicine residents listening to MRAP and the retention of information versus reading. And then they've done various things if you listen to it in the car versus if you're like sitting down listening to it or exercising listening to it. And they found that like listening to it in the car versus just sitting there and only listening to it, you absorb it just as well. But I think the other important thing, and there's some research behind this too, is that learning shouldn't necessarily be easy. Learning to an extent should be hard, and hard is good. In fact, the more you struggle with learning, the more you're likely to retain it. And there's actually been some studies looking at that too. When you teach a material in a way that is actually harder for somebody to like hear, or you put like different text that's harder to read on your slides or harder to read in your text, that when people have to struggle to read it, they actually retain the information more because they're working more to learn it. So I think learning theories are a myth. What they really are, and this came from that a learning theory a lecture that we got, but learning theories are a myth. What they are their learning preferences. And if something's easy, that will give you familiarity, but it's not until you struggle with it that you really gain understanding of it.
Right. Okay, I love that. So if someone came out with a paper tomorrow that said, at your agency, at Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, if someone came and gave me the data that said, hey, Pete, 95% of the education that your medics are taking in by their own, but they're claiming this is not through the channels from the department. 95% of it is external. Should that impact me as a medical director in what I do tomorrow, in your opinion? What should I do tomorrow after I hear that data?
I think you have to ask why.
Okay, right? Okay, so either you're saying that why maybe we're not giving enough education, maybe they don't like the education because it's from 1985, and we're just checking the box. Right. So my point in asking the question is that unless we know, and that's why was asking Tanner, like what research has to be done today to allow me as a medical director make a better decision on what I do tomorrow to present that data and education to my personnel, rather than me thinking I'm just gonna do death by PowerPoint and just me go to sleep at night thinking that they're doing what I'm asking them to do, which more than likely they're not. So let's go to Lou first and then to Gordon.
So I think you brought up two different issues. Many departments use either CAN courses or whatever to meet CE requirements. So they'll have that AHA, ACLS is required in our state. It's the same stuff you're going to get depending on who does it. But the medics who really want to learn more are going to go out and do all the podcasts and do all the other things to learn in addition to what's required. So there's the floor that you have to learn, and there's no limit to what you can learn if you really want to.
Good. Oh, yeah, very true. Gordon.
Almost identical to what Lou is saying. I think that a lot of the PowerPoints, in-person lectures, the alphabet cards, or the alphabet stuff, we use that as our base to research. So our research hours, that's what we do. It's not the fun stuff, it's the work stuff. I think the podcast work is a really good personal growth tool. I wish when I was growing my career that I had that. I had to just dig through and ask every type of person, and there was no way for me to weed through the good people. I had to trial and error and get a lot of bad answers and get a lot of good answers and say, combine them and say, who has the best answer here, and try to get some kind of data on that. I think that for personal growth, podcasts are amazing. When somebody really wants to do that, really wants to go out there, they don't want to be the paramedic that does the bare minimum, that just shows up to class, that just plays on their phone the whole time. The one that really wants to make a difference and be something in his career, they're going to do that. And I think that's where the separating divided point, that podcasts are great for that personal growth.
Excellent, great answer. Let's give our two guests the final word, and we'll go from there, and we'll head over to Dr. Pepe's webinar. So, Will, we'll start with you. Final words, and Ross. And I just want to say thank you guys for stepping out into the world of getting stuff done and not just talking about it and doing it. I will say that I hope that people today go and check you guys out, and I do hope that you figure a way to continue to grow this thing so that people can actually find what they love and something that actually allows them to become better leaders into the future. So I just want to say thank you for what you're doing as an educator myself. So Will, give us your final thoughts, and then we'll go to Ross.
They're simple, one, thank you for the platform and the voice. But we do this because we know that being a paramedic on the street can be super challenging at times. You can't be prepared for every single thing you come across. And so principles and framework help guide you. And we want to share that. We want to curate that. We want to bring that together under curiosity and humility. And we don't have all the answers. We really don't. We're nerds about this stuff, and we like sharing it.
Good. Join Nerd Nation here on the EMS webinar. Ross.
Thank you so much for having us. I wrote in the chat that I think when you're thinking about delivering education to your providers, there are two separate questions. What are they likely to engage with, and what is likely to increase their retention and make them better? And those are likely not the same thing. The educational delivery model is likely not the same between those two things, which is why I think it's important. We need to do more teaching on how to learn and connect it to people's why. They need to know why it matters to them, because once they understand the why, then they'll have some internal motivation to struggle with it and learn and better themselves. And it's Will and I's mission that we have found that paramedics feel like they're lacking mentorship. And so we would love to see more agencies focusing on their early paramedics to coach them intentionally, mentor them intentionally, and increase the institutional knowledge of the agency rather than having to try to reinvent the wheel with every new paramedic you hire.
Awesome. Well, I could say that from the Florida chapter, we thank you both very much. To all the podcasters and like folks like Jimmy Apple and Mike Caruncio and Scott Weingart, and many of us turn to you guys for great content. So on behalf of all of us here at the Florida chapter, we thank you. Are you guys going to be in Tampa in NMSP?
I will, yeah.
Okay, Ross, we'll see you. Will, got to come next year.
Yeah, sounds good.
And make sure you say hello. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. And by the way, the link for Peppy webinar is in the chat. I'll post it one more time, and we got some good stuff going on there too. So good to see everybody.